Our guest today is Jamie Mustard. He's an award-winning author who's written several books, and he's written a new book called Child X about his time in Scientology. He was born into Scientology in the Sea Organization and was involved all the way through into his teenage years. This book is very heavy and goes into the abuse that he suffered as a child and other children in Scientology and the Sea Organization suffered. We think you're going to find this conversation informative. Here's Jamie Mustard. Welcome everybody to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I am here with my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. How you doing, Janis?
Good, Mark. Good day, everyone. And I'm glad to be back. I've been vacationing. I've been with grandchildren. I've been slacking off, but I'm back on the job now. And today, I'm excited about today's interview, Mark, because though I'd never met him until I talked to him on the phone just a couple of days ago, I've known of him, and he's written a book called Child X because he was born in the Sea Org, and I can support a lot of what he says. You know, I wasn't there in Los Angeles in the childcare there where he was born and raised, but I've seen a lot of evaluations and Hubbard traffic and all sorts of stuff. So I can support a lot of what he says, though some people think he's very controversial. I get along great with him. We've been having some good laughs on the phone. So anyway, let me bring on Jamie Mustard.
Hey.
Hi, Jamie. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, guys.
You're welcome.
Good to talk to you. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I'm controversial, but what did George Orwell say? In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act.
That's a good point, because the fact of the matter is that we're telling the truth and we're telling people's stories, you know what I mean? And if we weren't telling the truth, we know that there's an organization called Scientology Office of Special Affairs that would come after us. We've never had anything happen to us because we tell the truth, you know?
You know what's funny about, you bring up Office of Special Affairs, they even denied, this is how much they know about the past. They denied that there was a daycare on the Apollo, on the Royal Scotsman. Well, because none of those people were there. And Jamie, when you were born in the Sea Org, none of those people were around.
Yeah, I mean, you know, listen, I really want to say, like, I like the name of your show because, you know, peeling the onion, because you can never peel to the end of this onion.
That was her idea.
Okay, like, you know, this thing, when it gets inside of you, you know, I don't know that you can heal from this thing. Totally. It gets in you. I mean, Hannah says it in Going Clear that it gets inside, you know, it sticks to you like glue. And you know, that's, you know, I've had, I mean, just to, you know, I guess we just kick it off with some truth. You know, I've been heavily, I guess, attacked or messed with by OSA, but the attacks from and the stuff from former members that are supposedly against this group, and no, I believe they are against this group. Those criticisms and those attacks have been far, far worse than the OSA attacks. Wow. And when I decided to do a book and talk out, I knew that I was pretty sure that was going to be the case. And I told myself, unless you're willing to have people that went through this thing with you go after you in severe ways, don't do it. So when it did happen, I was fully expecting it.
Yeah. Right. Just so you know, we, like, you know, I was in management. I joined the Sea Org at 17, and, you know, we left when I was 32 years old. Right. And I was in management. I worked for Miscavige and all that sort of stuff, but I had no concept of what was going on in childcare because I didn't have kids, you know what I mean? You know, just never had it. So when we started doing this channel, we started interviewing people that were abused, you know, people like Danielle Chamberlain, people like, Corinne Sullivan, people like that, you know, that were abused. the stories were eye-opening to me because it was not my reality when I was in there, but I totally believe what they're telling me. It's just funny how in Scientology, it's a need-to-know basis, on a lot of things. You only know what you're basically dealing with, not necessarily the whole picture of what's going on. And if you never had kids like me, and I lived at a base where we couldn't have kids, I had no idea what was going on. So it's been very eye-opening, these things. And I just ordered your book, as I told you, and I'm looking forward to listening. I have the audiobook.
No, I really appreciate it. Listen, a lot of people, it seems to be that no one can remember the kids. I mean, I've seen a lot of ex-members speak out. I don't want to call anybody out by name. Yeah. But and talk about how they never saw the kids and people that I saw. So how come I saw you and you didn't see me? I didn't have an invisibility cloak on. And, the reason I'm here, I guess the reason I agreed, I'd had a really nice conversation with Janis and that made me feel really safe that we could have a real conversation and that I wouldn't have to, censor myself or, she wasn't, don't say this or don't say that. But the reason I'm here is because I wanted to do it is because I think you guys are really fair. And I wanted to, I don't feel that the story of what happened to the children of especially, of what the so-called Sea Org, Scientology's religious paramilitary, has ever been told. I don't even think that the aftermath is amazing as it was, and it was amazing, even began to scratch the surface, because what you had was all these incredible stories of people in their 40s and their 50s, and yeah, they're kids. But what people don't understand is that from the late 60s through the 90s or early 90s, this was a systematic child destruction machine that occurred on 4 continents. Los Angeles, California, Central Florida, Sydney, Australia, Johannesburg, South Africa, Mexico City. And, there was one story one day I went to Goodreads and I was just looking at one of my reviews and there was a review on there from a woman that I'd never met in Sydney. And she had just listened to the book and she said, this is a different continent and a different different age group, but the abuse and the stories are exactly the same. And it was emotional. Like I had to hold back tears because it really made me understand that, just the extent of the suffering that this happened to thousands of kids over 30 years. And it was systematic and no one has ever talked about it.
Right.
We talked about it as a system and what it is. Like, I'll say one more thing and then I'll kind of shut up and let you guys, respond. But, I was talking to one ex-member and I said, and I made that statement and they got kind of mad at me and said, well, that's not true. You're not on the Discord. You're not on the Reddit. The use of children has been talked about. You're not with it. And I said, show me on the Reddit, show me on the Discord, show me any video that talks about what being told when you're 4 years old that you're a trillion-year-old fallen god or you're an adult in a baby body does to you. What being told when you're 3 years old that you're not allowed to express emotion. No HENR, no human emotion and reaction. What doing TR0, no blink back then. Eyes, zero for 5 hours to a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old. What is doing TR0 bull bait where you're trained not to react, that systematically strips you of your empathy due to a 5-year-old child? What does the objectives where you sit there for dozens, if not hundreds of hours, letting yourself be controlled, being conditioned and groomed to controlled due to a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old child? That stuff has never been talked about. Those are the true abuses. The true abuses are, the poverty, I never went to school, the lack of education, those are heavy abuses. But these processes that were done to children that had no meta intelligence with developing brains, it's an ice pick to a child. And I don't know if there's a recovery.
Right. Well, Jamie, you bring that up, and I was born into Scientology. And I know exactly what you're saying because I did hear about it happening with other kids. My mother, however, when she was doing her drills, her TRs or whatever, and the drilling to process PCs, she drilled them on us, but she did it not like hard TRs or forced on us. She made it a fun thing for us to mimic her, or, you know, and to talk to the doll or be the doll and make the answers, you know. So we were involved, but it wasn't like how you've seen it with other children in the Sea Org nurseries, which is damaging.
Yeah, listen, you know, your mother, to me, I have a very ambivalent view of your mother because obviously when I was a little kid, she was in charge of your mother was Yvonne Gent. She was a legend in confidant of Hubbard, I guess, and a legend of this movement. And, you know, she's a controversial figure in my head, or an ambivalent figure in my head, for this reason. When people talk about her, it's almost like they're talking about this like thing that existed on the side of Hubbard's fever dream. You know, she was this, you cannot find a person that didn't love Yvonne Gent. And she grew the artist and celebrity side of it. And because she was so kind, and because she dealt with people in a different way, I think, she was doing good. She was trying to use it and use it with compassion and kindness. But I also think because of that, people got a very skewed idea. Like anybody that was dealing with Hubbard's techniques under Yvonne Gent was probably getting a very softer, kinder version of these techniques. And she's probably the only person that's why she's such a kind of legendary figure in the history of this thing. I don't know if you agree, but that's how I see her.
No, I do tend to agree with you on that because she was not a brutal executive like so many have been. She was very gentle and people wanted to help her because of how she appreciated them and validated people. She wasn't that hardcore.
She was very, I mean, but you have to understand there was only one of her. You know, when you say to Yvonne Gent, to anyone that was around back then, they will stop, look up, kind of smile and go, Yvonne.
Yeah.
You know, no other person in the history of this movement has that effect on people.
Because she had warmth. She had warmth.
Yeah. So
she had empathy for people. Trust me.
Yeah, words you never hear in Scientology, and you definitely never hear in this.
It's funny. It's funny. My dad got me in Scientology when I was 14, and he read Dianetics and he got it, and he was retired Navy. Anyway, he was a mission holder, and then he left in 1979. He was on his OT levels and did his briefing course and all that. Him and his second wife, they decided to close down their mission because they got involved in this whole other cult called Ramtha, you know, and so they had to be declared suppressive people, you know, and so I was motivated. My goal was to work for Hubbard. So I went along with the program. I disconnected from my dad and my brother, my younger brother, who was living with my dad, and got declared too. And it wasn't until I left the Sea Organization that we reconnected and reestablished a relationship. But my point I was going to make is that my dad pointed out to me after I reconnected with him, he said, you know, the concept that's missing in Scientology. And I said, what? He goes, the concept of love. You know, I mean, you don't have love in Scientology. It's affinity. You know what I mean? The concept of love and being loved. And that's what Yvonne emoted. She loved the people that she was around. And that's just my opinion on the subject as far as that goes. There was no love in Scientology.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what I was, right before you said that, I was kind of saying words you never hear in Scientology: love, compassion, empathy, grace. Yeah. Right. I mean, you know, Janis brought up on our phone call, she brought up Dev T, and she said, you know, is there another word for Dev T? And I was like, yeah, extra work, efficiency, right? Yeah. Like efficiency, like there's tons of words. We didn't need that word. We didn't need the word interbulate. We have the word disturbed. Yeah. The lingo, if you read Child X, there's not one Hubbard word in it, because one of the things that's part of the trick is he has all of these clean, cute words for really nasty things. You know, there was no cadet org. It was a poverty-stricken animalization of children in an orphanage-like environment. I mean, I never learned to brush my teeth. I didn't have bed sheets. I never went to school. By the time I was 19, when I did my first escape, I could read at a high level from studying the doctrine, but I couldn't write a sentence. I could barely write characters. I didn't know how to use a comma. I didn't know how to use a paragraph. I was animalized by this group. There was a group of us that grew up before the complex, before the blue building. And those conditions, there was one lady, she saw me do an interview. She was a 7-year-old girl that was one of my caretakers at the Asho Day House, 811 Beacon Street in downtown LA, or on the outskirts of downtown LA, where all the babies were in the 70s. She said, this woman contacted me after I did my first interview. I had been on her mind for 50 years, this woman, she said, do you remember how they bathed you? And, I remember we didn't get a lot of human touch. All right. We were basically setting up at our own sick for weeks at a time because there was 1 or 2 caretakers to 30 babies in a slum. But she said that once a week, they would draw a bath and they would dip us in it and wipe all the stuff off of us and hand us to another caretaker who would put on a diaper. And then they would dip the next baby, wouldn't change the water. Right. And that would be a crazy story if that was where it stopped. At 3 years old, I moved to the Melrose building, and that was where my memory really starts. And that is where the horror begins. We shared towels. I didn't have bed sheets. We had grimy mattresses. When we first moved there and I was 3, the steel bunks were sacked 3 high. And because I had no agency, I was on the top bunk. Fell off it all the time because I was 3 years old. I should have had a cover. I don't know how I didn't break my neck. And I really do believe that this story of, and people, push back at me for this, but I've called several kids that grew up that, watch the Aftermath, that are massive fans of the Aftermath, as am I. Okay. And I'll say to them, any kid that was from, in Hubbard's paramilitary as a child from a very young age, that watch the Aftermath, do you feel like this story has ever been told? And they'll say no. So I would like to ask you a question. I'll start with Mark, since he was at the Int base and he wasn't seeing kids every day. Okay. Right. But I believe that Scientology, or Hubbard's greatest crime, is the systematic physical and mental destruction of children. And it's the crime that no one talks about. Really talks about what was done to these kids. And I guess the book started in the 70s. So I'll say Scandal of Scientology, Paulette Cooper. So let's say we started 1970. It's been 55 years. And in 55 years, okay, Mark Headley wrote a really good kind of book. I enjoyed his book, Adventure Story. I didn't know a lot about the Int base, so I enjoyed that book. Catherine Spolino wrote an excellent book about what it was to be a cadet. Very different from my experience, but excellent. But the truth of the matter is that there's never been a book on how this was systematically done to kids until Robert Dam's book was translated into English a few months ago. 55 years. No one wants to talk about this.
Janis is holding up the book cover.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. No, and no one saw us. I mean, like, I've seen people that I like in interview after interview talk, well, I didn't know what was going on with the kids. I saw you. Right? So I don't think these people are lying, and I don't think they're bad people. I think they're good people. But I think there's something about Hubbard's mechanisms or doctrines that have just made them completely occlude or forget. Like, if you look at a child as not a child, but you really start, like, if you're in this movement, you believe when you're looking at a 4-year-old that that's a trillion-year-old fallen god in a baby body. You believe it. You don't just believe it, you know it. You guys were in it, you know it. Okay. And like, if there's one thing about Scientologists or people that Hubbardites, is they are certain.
Oh, yeah.
So you didn't see a child. You're never in your mind. I meet people that are out of this thing 30 years. And their major work they do is to work against, their primary thing in life is to expose Scientology. And they didn't see the kids, and they'll still talk about children. They will still talk about children like they're fallen gods in a baby body. I look at a 20-year-old, when I'm around a 20-year-old kid that has been affected by this thing, I look at them as a child. I look at someone as a child till they're at least 26, because your brain is not fully formed until 26.
Right.
So I'm curious if, when I say this stuff, and I'm not trying to be too aggressive, guys, I don't want to get worked up, but I'm curious, Mark, if you have ever thought about that, or, this thing I'm saying about this kind of systematic thing on all these different places. Like, what's amazing about it is like Stonelands, or if you look at Robert Dam's book, or I have a good friend that grew up right at that time in Copenhagen. So she was in those dormitories, it's identical. The Fountain Building was the Ritz-Carlton compared to where we were before that. So, I'm just curious if you were aware of how many kids and how systematic, and if what I'm saying sounds credible to you.
No, absolutely it does. As a matter of fact, I can give you a little bit of my history in terms of like, I joined the Sea Organization in Clearwater in Florida, right? And, Janis knows this. As soon as they hit the land base from the Apollo, all of a sudden it was like free, have kids. You know what I mean? They're all having kids.
Boom.
The baby boom happened as soon as they hit the land, because they got off the ship. I wasn't on the ship, right? So when I arrived, there was like a 2-room nursery in the cabanas at the Fort Harrison with tons of babies in there and not enough nannies, and so they were constantly having to get more nannies to meet just the basic state requirements.
Nannies isn't nannies. It's funny that they called them nannies, isn't it? Because they weren't really.
Yeah, well, that's what they called them, but that's not what I mean. So they basically were constantly putting people in there, and because they were having more and more babies, and then eventually they bought the Quality Inn, and then the parents and the kids all moved out there, and so they could be together. But just so you know, from my point of view of this, right, when I was joined the Sea Org at 17, 18 years old, I was dedicated, and it was Hubbard's mission to clear the planet or whatever, right? So anything that got in the way of that was considered, like we said, dev T. It was extra time, extra work, right? I got married, but I never had kids. But, parents had to take family time, which was really just an hour a day, if they were lucky to get that, because production always came first. That was always the viewpoint from the managers and the senior people. The kids were, and it came from Hubbard too, the kids were always considered basically an annoyance, a distraction. You know what I mean? Because we're here to clear the planet. So they're always got secondary consideration. And when I worked for Miscavige, it was the same thing. These people were having kids everywhere. And so he then outlawed kids in the Sea Org, can't have kids, So it was always looked upon that way. Now, the parents didn't they wanted to be with their kids, the ones that I knew that had kids, but, they would constantly, the kids got they were second choice, because if they had to do their job and do something on their job, I'm not going to be at family time tonight, kids, So that was there. Yeah.
Family time, an hour a week with your parents. Janis, you want to comment?
Yeah, I got lots to say.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, because Janis grew up on the ship. Yeah.
Well, I arrived on the ship at 11 years old.
Right.
And so they tried to put me in the nursery, because if you're under 12, you go in the nursery. Well, at first they put me in washing dishes, but then, and I was washing dishes, and then I was cleaning cabins and so forth. And then Hubbard was going to come aboard, and I wasn't yet 12. So anyone under 12 had to go into the nursery. I fought that like crazy, because I saw all these little kids with a few nannies, and they were all filthy, and I managed to stay out of it.
Were they nannies, Janis? Were they nannies? Did they send the best and the brightest to the nursery?
And that was the problem. They would take people who got busted from a job and send them to the nursery to take care of the children, instead of putting your best in there to care for those children. Now, as a messenger working with Hubbard, Irene Derman, Irene Howie, Irene Dunleavy, whatever
I know her
people
from when I
know.
was a kid. Yeah.
Okay. She was LRH's personal communicator, and she had a 4-year-old in the nursery on the ship and was pregnant with twins. And every night she would bring Shane's clothes up and have her steward wash them. And every time she went down to see Shane, she would bring clean clothes for him. And he was the cleanest kid in that daycare. All the others were filthy. The parents wouldn't go visit when they should, or they were too busy on post. But Irene was always there for Shane. And then when she had the twins, of course, she had those ashore in Corfu, and then they came aboard. And she made it a point, and then she finally left with the twins because it was decided children don't belong on the ship. We'd already had David Anthony get his finger slammed in a big metal door, and it took one of his fingers off at 18 months old, and there were some nannies who liked the kids. There were some that did not, and it was just dangerous to have children there.
Yeah, Derek Green locked up in the
Derek Green, Felice Green's son. He was put in the chain locker. I think he was only 4 years old when he was put down there. Another little girl.
For how long was a 4-year-old put in a chain locker?
Oh, I don't remember how long. Okay. It was days. Okay. It was days, and there was another little girl.
Would you call that torture? Putting a 4-year-old in a chain locker by themselves for days? Yeah. Okay.
And also there was a little girl, 6 years old. I thought her name was Angela, but she called me her name and told me her correct name. She was there at 6 years old, and Hubbard kept saying she belongs there. She's an SP. And I'm like, how could a 6-year-old be an SP? And she actually climbed out of the chain locker through the hole where the chain is. She was so small. But when she called me, she was telling me how her dad told her Hubbard saved her from the chain locker. And I'm like, no, he was the one that ordered you into that chain locker. But somehow the dad has twisted it around to make it as if Hubbard was the savior. And that was not true.
No, I mean, it's a really good point.
There's this book here, Child X.
It's available on Amazon. And if you want to know what was done, I've tried to tell the story. I've lost so many of my friends to drugs and alcohol that were in these early days with me. I've tried to tell the story of what I believed happened to thousands of children on 4 continents over 30 years. Robert Dam is the first person ever to come out and just say, this is what this book's about. Okay. And because he saw some kids that bugged him in the 80s, and it bugged him 40 years later, and he had to go find these kids and talk to them. And most of them wanted to be anonymous. And I asked him why. And he said, shame. Yeah. The amount of shame. And, I'd never gone through a depression in my life until last year when this book came out, and I was revealing to the world what was done to me. The physical violations of my body from birth through 19, to have to learn to write at 19 years old, having never gone to school, was pretty demoralizing. And so I think, I tell this story. My mother came from a prominent family. I tell this story through my ancestors, through my family. My family was freed slaves and had accomplished amazing things from 1865 to 1940. And all of that was destroyed by this group. And that was a time, there were lots of groups like this at this time, but this one is particularly nasty. So anyway, that was my long run. I would really urge you to listen to the audio. But I think that if you look at this, you'll see some things that you haven't seen before. And that if you buy it and if you listen to it, you need to understand that this was occurring on 4 continents over 30 years, and it happened to thousands of kids. And one of the things that people ask me this, why would the conditions be the same in Copenhagen, the same in Sydney, the same in Johannesburg, the same in Los Angeles, the same in Central Florida? Why would you go out of your way to animalize children? Doesn't make any sense. If you see a child purely as an asset of labor, if you had a baby pig, it wouldn't be worth anything to you. So you'd put it in the dirtiest, cheapest pig pen that you can, grow it to size and then sell it for slaughter. They were basically penning us like animals and growing us to where we could to 10 or 12 years old, so that we could be an asset of labor. Because we were uneducated, we would have no prospects. We would have no ability to do anything else. So my question for Mark, and then I would like Janis to answer the question too, because this is the thing that no one talks about. And I particularly want to ask Mark because he was at the international secret base, not so secret anymore, in Hemet with the Grand Poobah, the Grand Wizard of, I'll call him the Grand Wizard of Scientology, Mr. David Miscavige, Captain David Miscavige. The big breakdown that I see in this there's two things that I see in this kind of ex-Scientology community, which I don't believe should be even called a community. I look at anything that occurred under Hubbard's paramilitary as a mental asylum. And I don't really think that people leaving a mental asylum should be forming communities. Now, if you had a friend in that mental asylum and they were your close friend, of course, you'd keep a friend. I mean, Janis has people on the Apollo that she knew, and there's a brotherhood of surviving something like that, or a sisterhood, right? But the two things that I see the most in this X group are we learned to disconnect from each other and to verbally destroy each other. And we come out and we get on YouTube and, and I've been guilty of it too. And we disconnect from each other and we put heads on pikes and we give two gruesomes to confront and we destroy each other. And that never leaves. And that to me, destroying someone verbally and psychically and disconnecting from somebody, those are the core two pillars of Hubbard's fever dream, Scientology. So I'm going to set it up with that. And then I'm going to say this to Mark as my question. I believe the reason Scientology never comes down, and I'd like you both to answer, but because he was at the imp base with Miscavige, I'm asking him first. But I would like you to answer too from a Hubbard perspective, Janis, is I believe that the reason it never comes down is because people committed and witnessed crimes, whether they were criminal in nature or like in effect, or felonies, which I'm sure you witnessed plenty, Mark, okay? And they believe that when you leave Scientology, well, that was just some shit you did in Scientology. You can't say that when you leave the mob, like you robbed a bank, you killed someone, but then you figure it out, you get out of the mob, your dad was a mobster, you grew up in it. You don't go, well, that was just some mob shit that I did. But the prevailing concept, this is why Scientology will not come down. Okay? Hubbard's fever dream will not come down. The prevailing concept among people that leave this thing and start channels on YouTube and foundations, and I don't want to, or whatever they do, okay? And I don't want to generalize. When I say foundations, I'm talking about the Aftermath Foundation, okay? They believe that that once you leave, that was just some stuff that you did under the influence. That was not my experience at all. When they started to make me and pressure me to commit criminal acts, I left. The majority of people will not commit criminal acts. And I believe that unless we start holding people accountable for the crimes they committed, because they committed a crime. It is a felony in the state of California and the state of Florida to witness a felony and to not report it. That's a crime. You committed it. You have to be accountable for what you did. Doesn't mean that we need to hit you over the head and shame you and berate you. There were, Sheila Huber stepped up. If you want to see what accountability looks like, watch the Sheila Huber videos on YouTube. Hy Levy stepped up as a former person who took money, and he admitted to what he did. And you see what accountability looks like. So I'm asking you, Mark, because you were up there and you saw things, is when you leave Scientology and you saw all this stuff and you took part in destroying people and destroying their lives, is that just some shit you did in Scientology? Or do people have to be held accountable? I'd like you to answer, and then I would love to hear Janis answer. Because maybe I'm wrong.
Well, no, I think you are wrong, because I'll tell you right now, I don't feel at the time that I was abusing people or doing
I'm not
something
saying you.
illegal.
I'm not saying you.
No, I understand, but that's kind of like what you're inferring. And I'm totally fine in what you're asking me, right?
Yeah.
But Janis knows this, and people who know me that were in the Sea Org, is that I didn't put up with that kind of crap. I was not an abuser. I did not.
No, I don't think you were, Mark.
No, I understand. But when you said I witnessed crimes, the first crime that I really witnessed that I knew was a crime was when David Miscavige physically attacked me. Okay. And I was gone like a month later, because that was not Scientology. And that was not, my experience. I was lucky that I graduated high school before I joined the Sea Org. In other words, I had an education. I knew a lot more than someone who had been raised in Scientology. So as soon as he put his hands on me, I went, whoa, this is not okay. And then after we left, we find out, that then became, the de rigueur. That's what they did all the time, beating each other up. And I'm going like, that's Lord of the Flies. I'm going like, that's not happening. And I didn't care that I was a Scientologist and I believed in Scientology, but I went, I'm not putting up with that crap. You know what I'm saying? So, I appreciate what you're saying, but like I said, I was dedicated. I was a teenager, and my goal was to work with Hubbard to get to the int base, because he was still alive at the time, and work for him, because I was a true believer. I had already gotten up the bridge in auditing and stuff, and it had changed my life for the better, So I was a believer. So then when we left, like I said, the reason Peeling the Onion really applies is that after a year or two, I read Russell Miller's book, and I read, a bunch of other stuff, and I started, we didn't have the internet back then. It was just, 1990.
I want to apologize to you. I didn't mean to presume that you. I shouldn't have presumed that you committed things or saw things. But
no, but I will tell you this. I mean, I know Miscavige and Marty Rappin, they did shit. Obviously they did. I found out about it later. But whenever they were in his office, the door was shut between us.
Did Mike do stuff?
No, I didn't have any relationship or dealing with Mike when he was.
I know, but do you think
do
you think that the commanding officer, and again, of the Office of Special Affairs did illegal acts or participated?
I'm sure
in illegal
that
acts?
they did. I'm sure that they did now. But see, that's after the fact, knowing that, you know what I mean? I mean, the Guardian's office, obviously, they did illegal acts.
Okay, good. So, obviously, I was in the FBI raid at 7, so that was the first time. But after it changed from the Guardian's office, it became the Office of Special Affairs. Did they do illegal acts? Right. I'm
sure that they did now, because we found out.
Okay, so assume I'm not talking about you, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, if you committed criminal acts at the international base, or you witness other people doing that, are you accountable? Or because you're a believer, is it all wiped clean when you figure it out and leave?
No, I mean, you have to take responsibility for your actions. If you were involved in something like that, you have to admit it. You have to make it known. I think there's some revelation that needed to be done. I've talked to people that, left the Sea Org after I did. And the first thing I say to them is that, look, if I ever did anything to hurt you or in any way, shape, or form, I apologize.
What was your job? What was your job there?
I was a corporate liaison. I ran David Miscavige's office at the Gold Base. In other words, his domestic affairs, his administrative affairs, and I dealt with the Golden Era Productions, the movie studio.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Yeah. Okay, and again, I genuinely want to know your answer, and I apologize if I implied something negative about you.
We're having a conversation here.
Yeah. But I didn't mean to, imply something. But there's a guy on the board, and I'm just going to state facts, right? I'm not trying to call anybody out. I just want to say one thing, because it has to be said and no one says it. Okay. There's a guy on the board of the Aftermath Foundation. I'm not going to say who it is. Okay. He's on video. It's got thousands and thousands of views, talking about how he kept a slush fund to traffic children and others. Now, that person was never prosecuted. I'm sure the statute of limitations is up on that. I'm sure that person would not get in trouble. Okay. Now, is it appropriate for that person to be on a board for victims if they were never held accountable and never took any accountability for those actions?
Well, I can't really comment on that, because I'm not sure. I don't know the circumstances. But to me, obviously, I don't know if they took responsibility for it in some way. Do you know what I mean? I just don't know.
I know,
I realize that that's kind of a Scientology point of view of taking responsibility.
No, that's why I use the word accountability. I use the word accountability very directly.
But Jamie, I think what we got happening here is two different levels of what happens in the SEAL, because when I was in there was no such thing as a slush fund. for trafficking children. Because, and I mentioned this on the phone to you, that when a 15-year-old was slept with a 21-year-old on the ship, this guy claimed that she thought she was 16, and per Panama and British law, 16 was the age limit. But she was 15. When Mary Sue Hubbard found out that he had slept with a 15-year-old, she went to her cabin, strapped on a knife. She found him down in the 'tween decks and put that knife at his throat and told him to get off the ship. And he was dumped in Morocco. No money, no nothing. All he had was a uncashed ticket. And then he had to find his own way. So that's how Mary Sue Hubbard treated it. Now, Ron Hubbard, the Commodore, when he found out that a guy had slept with his daughter at 17, that guy got a fist in his face, which any father has that right to do if someone has basically, seduced their daughter.
Especially at that time, at that time, it was a different time.
Yes, it was a different time. So that's what I saw growing up on the ship.
Okay.
It was not tolerated.
I guess the point, listen, one of the things I like about you guys, and I was, appreciated that you invited me on, and I'm not trying to be overly bold or anything like that. I'm just saying that there's some real obvious things that happen, is that you guys just let people tell their stories, and they're valuable stories. Right. I'm not interested. Right. I see a lot of content where it's like, look how weird this is, and look how weird David Miscavige is, and look how weird, Ron Hubbard was, or look how weird
OT3. Look how weird OT3 is. And all
I don't care about any of that. The only thing that matters to me is the suffering of people and the abuse of people.
Yeah.
Right.
And so there's a foundation called the Aftermath Foundation that's named after the former head of the Office of Special Affairs, who never said one single crime that he did that wasn't already known, other than Bob Lipton and Lisa McPherson. The guy never said anything. The Scientology management, the Church of Scientology, has never said a single word about the crimes that say Michael Rinder, who actually I was a fan of on the Aftermath. I applauded what he did on the Tampa Bay Times because it helped me come out. But the Scientology has never said any crime that he did while he was in, and he never said any crimes while he was in. He has a channel where he's talked over and over and over about all of the crimes that OSA committed. Crimes. You can go to his YouTube channel. There's a dozen videos where he's talking about crimes they committed. It's just not him talking about himself. Listen, this guy's not around to defend himself. I'm not trying to disparage him because he actually did a lot of good. But what I'm saying is this whole thing of like former executives that leave a cult or whistleblow against a movement, leaving, and then forming the leadership that's against that movement, this is not new. It happens all the time, okay? And it is over the decades, or, it has become completely inappropriate. It's completely inappropriate that there would be that this person would talk about their own crimes, if we don't know what he did, if Scientology doesn't say what he did, if he doesn't say what he did, we can obviously assume that it was bad enough that it can't be mentioned, right? So what I think is, when somebody leaves Scientology, my big beef is when somebody leaves Scientology, and this is for Janis first, okay? As long as they leave Scientology, then they can do anything they want. Anything goes. But if they name a foundation after a guy that says he never knew anything because he was too busy in Florida covering up a homicide, which they got changed after 5 years of work to a negligent, whatever they got the coroner to turn over, but it was originally negligent homicide. And he says that's why. I
don't know what that is.
Lisa McPherson. That was
okay.
The coroner looked at a negligent homicide that Marty and Mike worked for years, and they got it overturned.
Okay.
Yeah. My point of the matter is like, as long as people commit crimes in these groups, and then they leave, and then it's all washed clean, it will never come down, because we're not holding the people accountable for. I don't care about Scientology. I don't care about Scientology's beliefs. I only care. Did you harm somebody? Did you commit harmful criminal acts that hurt people and destroyed their lives or caused suffering? That's all I care about. I don't care about 3. I don't care about weird, David Miscavige drinking scotch. I don't care about any of it. Did you hurt people? And I care about the crimes that even wouldn't fall under the felony code. And so
let me ask you a question, Jamie. Let me ask you a question. Do you believe in forgiveness?
Of course. Of course.
The only reason I ask, and I'm not criticizing you, but the only reason I say that is because, people did things that they're sure they're not proud of, and maybe they were criminal or whatever. But if they come out and they start doing good things and exposing these things that were going on, I mean, I can forgive some of the, anything that was done to me. Yeah, because to me, forgiveness is what's needed. You know what I mean? It's like, because people fall under the influence of this Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard, and they did things because they thought they were helping.
That's where we disagree. That's where we disagree.
But I'm saying, but they believe that. You know what I mean?
I'm sure they believe it, but that's not how the law works.
I'm saying that they've now stepped away from it, and they go like, man, you know what? I probably shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have done this and all of that. I can forgive those people.
I can forgive those people too, but if you committed felonies, you're accountable for those felonies. And unless,
but I mean, it's a question of but here's the thing. You say felonies, right? Okay. Well, where's the proof, or where, you know what I mean? Because you do have the assumption of, innocence in this country. And unless there's an accusation saying that Joe Jones did this, and here's the proof, and that's it. Then you can say that's a crime. Okay, but if it's just sort of like a generalization of like, well, you were part of the
here's where
committed crimes, that's wrong.
Again, listen. One thing I love about what you said, words you never hear in Scientology: grace, compassion, love, forgiveness. I love the empathy. I love that you said that. And you're right. We do need to forgive people. But, as far as the proof is concerned, there's a video on surviving Scientology. Or Scientology Money Project, one of those two, with current Aftermath board member talking about keeping a slush fund to traffic children. That's the proof. It's them saying they did it. And then you have a video channel. And again, Mike Rinder did a lot of good. I'm not trying to throw somebody under a bus that isn't around to defend themselves. Okay. I have all the forgiveness in the world. I don't even know that he remembered the things that he did because it's so powerful. Okay.
Well, Jamie. Yeah, and I've known Mike since I was 16, but I was not there when he was over OSA doing whatever he's being accused of.
I just want to speak. I want to speak
to after he wrote his book, I said, "Hey, Mike, you don't even make any mention of me in your book. I was your assistant when you were the chief officer." And he looked at me and says, "You were? I don't remember that." And, and this is someone I'd known all these years. He doesn't remember or didn't remember everything, because I thought that was a pretty key thing, that I worked with him for months as his assistant, and I knew him all these years.
I think it's a really good point. And again,
also let me add to that, Janis. Jamie, you don't know this, but we had heavy fair game put on us, private investigators infiltrating us here in Las Vegas after we left the Sea Org for 25 to 30 years when Mike Rinder was over OSA, right? So when we asked him about it, there were certain things that he remembered, but there was a ton of stuff that was done and he just didn't remember it. That's what he at least told us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
I don't know.
Or he was locked up.
That's what he told us.
Well, the evidence.
Or he was locked up in the hole.
I get it. So what I'm saying is you have this Aftermath Foundation. Okay, that does some good. It gives money to people. But now it doesn't give money to people unless you sign a non-disparagement agreement. That non-disparagement agreement was created by Mike. He also created the non-disparagement agreements for the church. Yeah. Okay, it's a bad look, right? It's not about him. It's about this concept of nobody saying about there's an elephant in the room kicking us all in the face and we won't talk about it. And then you have a guy who has a video channel where he has video after video after video. The proof of him is his own videos where he's talking about crimes of the organization he ran for 23 years. Okay. And that's my proof for him. Now, again, I'm not here to disparage somebody. That guy did a lot of work and helped me, right? It's not about him. He's faceless. He's nameless to me. Okay.
What would you like to see done?
I would like to see, unless we know
in the ideal world, what would be
grace, love, forgiveness for everyone. But you don't name a foundation after. But you don't name a foundation after someone that ran the secret police for 23 years.
But okay, so Jamie,
and you don't have people that traffic children on boards. Help. Like, does that person deserve grace? Yes. Love, empathy, compassion, forgiveness, all of those things times 1,000. They're a victim, but they don't get to go on a board managing victims. That's where you draw the line. After World War II, we brought Werner von Braun over. He worked at slave labor camps where Jews were abused. Okay. And we still brought him over after the war to help us get to the moon. What we didn't do is put him on the board of the Simon Wiesenthal Foundation. There's certain things, when you do certain things that are so bad that are criminal towards children and others, that your ability to be on a board and be an advocate for victims, it just doesn't go that far. It's inappropriate. If you were to go on and ask AI and plug in this whole scenario into AI, that would give you, 300 instances of whistleblowers leaving and the executives in those organizations creating the whistleblower group, okay, or leading the whistleblower group, they would tell you, it would say one for one, has it happened before that a major person that was an executive in an organization then leaves and whistleblows that a foundation or something gets named after them? Yes, it happens all the time.
Right.
But you would also say, is it appropriate? No, in this time, it's outrageous. It's completely bonkers. And the reason I have to say this is the amount of crimes and violations to my physical body. When I came back in 84 and 85, all my friends had been kicked out into the street that were 14 or older that hadn't wouldn't refuse to sign a Sea Org contract. That came down from the Office of Special Affairs. That was part of it. Okay. And the amount of kids that I've lost, okay, I believe all of these people should be forgiven. They should all have empathy. They should all have love. They should all have grace. But naming a board after them, everyone knows that.
Yeah.
Any reasonable person can see
Jamie,
that is an abomination. Okay.
Go ahead, Janis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what you expect us to do about that, because we're not on the Aftermath Foundation. We're not part of it. I do refer people there. I have sent my own contributions, and I do know those people and I can take it up with them, but it's not something that I can force myself on them, but that's just doing the old Sea Org bullshit.
I get it. And you know what you could do? You know what you could do? You just did it. You let me say it.
Okay.
Sure.
You let me say it. And whether Mark, whether you guys agree with me or not, you're reasonable people and you let me say it. But
I don't disagree. Look, I don't disagree with what you're saying, or you're right to say it at all. I'm just pushing back a little bit because, forgiveness and grace is really what's needed, and that's all. I was just trying to
know, and all I'm trying to say, if you look at what happens in a RICO case, or when you see a RICO case, a racketeering case, which is really what Scientology is, it's like the mob. When you see those cases flip, it's because as individual criminals commit crimes, those individual criminals are then held accountable for those crimes, even if they were under the influence. And then by we're going to give you immunity if you tell. So unless we look at each individual for what they did in terms of accountability, it can never technically be seen as a criminal organization, and it can never technically be brought down. That's all I'm trying to say. And I want you to push. Right. I want you to push back. I don't have it all figured out. And I want you to, and I just want to say one thing to Mark. I truly, truly appreciate you pushing back and saying, Jamie, empathy, compassion, forgiveness, grace. Like, that is the most important thing. The words you never hear.
Otherwise you never get over it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But that can live side by side with accountability. And we can't have.
I just wanted to mention something. You mentioned the Simon Wiesenthal thing. Do you remember a few years ago they gave Tom Cruise an award, the Simon Wiesenthal Foundation, and boy, did we raise a ruckus about that, because you're kidding me? Tom Cruise, the best buddy of
There's
David
no difference. It's exactly the same thing. Do I believe that these people that are on the board, that Mr. Rinder did a lot of good after he left? Tremendous amount. Yeah. Do I think that this other guy on the board that's on the board means well? I do. I'm not saying that they don't mean well. I'm saying that, Tom Cruise getting an award from Simon Wiesenthal's Foundation as he endorses a human trafficking organization and an organization that destroys and kills people and has resulted in so many deaths and bankruptcies and harm of people is insane. And I'm saying to have the former Office of Special Affairs where that person has video after video after video talking about, in general terms, the activities that they did. And again, and then the other guy just has flat out admits it. There is a line. You're allowed to do, you should be forgiven. You're allowed to do good. But should you be on a board should the thing be named after you? Should you be on a board? It's ridiculous. And the reason I have to say that it's ridiculous is at some point, some person in the big media is going to see it and they're going to talk about it. And they're going to rip it to shreds as being completely an alien Frankenstein. And when they do, that's going to create a bad look for everyone that's a former member. What this all comes down to is the reason I love you guys, by the way. The reason I'm here is because the story of the kids has not been told. It hasn't begun to be told.
And that's what we were going to tell.
And we're telling it. But I do believe that this ridiculousness is one of the reasons that the cover-up and the erasure of the destruction of these thousands of kids continues to persist.
Now, can a person change their view? So someone who had a slush fund for trafficking children is now trying to expose that?
100%.
And be on a board in order to try and help those children that were affected or the rest of them?
Yeah, you get to expose it.
I think people can change.
Of course you can change. And of course you could spend your whole life doing good, and you should. But do you get to be on a board advocating for victims? No, it's not like you don't. Like there's certain lines that are crossed that where you cross. Like if you trafficked children, it's like the Ashton Kutcher thing in Thorn, right? He was kicked off of. I don't even want to say what happened to him, but he was on this board for all this human trafficking stuff. He had all these human trafficking boards, and he was supporting Danny. Right. Do I think Ashton Kutcher should now be, after supporting Danny, should ever be allowed to be on a board? This is my opinion. I don't have anything personal against Ashton Kutcher. This is not even personal towards these guys. I think there's a certain line that you cross where it's a joke. The crimes the activities will come out. And of course they should be forgiven. I don't want anybody to go to jail. I'm not going after anybody. I'm just saying, don't put yourself on a board if you were involved in crimes against children and if you were involved in serious crimes hurting people.
So you think it's somewhat hypocritical then that they're on there? Is that what you're
saying? I think it hides. I think it very, very much, it lessens the things that were done and it erases what happened to the children.
Okay. And I have a question for you and Janis. It's a little bit changing the subject slightly, okay, but not totally, okay? Both of you were born into Scientology, okay?
Sea Org.
Both of you, both in the Sea Org, right?
I was born in
Janis.
No,
Janis
Jamie
grew up
was.
on the ship, right? But Janis grew up in the ship, and also with her parents for part of it. But then her parents were gone, and then she was left alone when she was 12, 13 years old, right?
12.
And of course, Jamie, your situation, right? But you didn't get educated. Neither one of you finished high school. You know what I mean?
Right.
Neither one of you. Okay. How do you explain the fact that you are both wildly successful in what you're doing now after all of that abuse and all of that lack of learning?
You want to go first, Janis, or me?
You go first. You're on
Do you think it's a good question? Do you think that's a good question? Do you think that's a good question?
It's my favorite question.
Well, no, I'm serious. I'm serious because that's look at, I hate that people are victims of things, but you guys have obviously overcome that to some degree. I'm not saying it never goes away, but you've overcome it. So what was it that made you overcome it? That's really what I'm trying to ask.
So that's such a great question. There's two things I would say. First of all, when I left at 19, I couldn't write. I could barely make characters. I didn't know how to use a comma, sentence, paragraph. 5.5 years later, I graduated from an Ivy League school, the London School of Economics. Now, you're not going to find a lot of cases of that. I was very lucky. And I worked very hard, but one of the ways that should have been, it was pretty impossible. I mean, I hate to say this, but I used Hubbard techniques as part of it. I used intention.
Mm-hmm.
I willed it, right? So, and the other thing that we learn in there that I learned from them is there's one thing about ex-members of this group, they know how to work.
Yes.
So I used, I'm sure I had I was born with a big brain or a good brain, but I worked really, really hard because you know how to work when you leave this thing. A lot of people leave in successful, even though they're uneducated, because they'll work like you've never seen. And I used intention as cause. I used will. And I'm embarrassed to say that, but obviously all of it's not bad, or people wouldn't get sucked into it. Right.
Well, there's no reason to be embarrassed about it. You know, that is a good thing, you know?
Yeah. But the other part, and then where I'd land on that question, then I'll turn it over to Janis so we can go, is that because I was able to get this special education and do the things that I do now, which I should not, I feel very lucky. It's almost like I feel like I was in a foxhole in World War I and both of my guys in the foxhole died and I shouldn't have, and a bullet went through my helmet and I took it off and I didn't die. And I somehow made it home when I shouldn't have. And I don't feel like I feel very lucky. And I feel like my entire generations of children, please, please, please read Child X. That I feel like because I got lucky, and I was lucky, my job is to speak for the kids that are too broken and damaged. So many of these kids have autoimmune diseases, or they have so much shame they won't speak out. And my job is, because I got lucky, is to speak for the kids that are no longer around to speak for themselves and or carry too much shame to speak for themselves. So this isn't really about the Aftermath Foundation. This is about, I do not want what happened. We're aging out. And unless we start taking it seriously and have a standard of accountability, we're going to be erased. What was done to us will be erased. I'm not mad at anybody. There's not one word of bitterness or anger. I got accused by that book being retribution because I feel like the ex-members that supposedly are our allies, they never saw any children. But you know what? I'll concede. I'll concede to Mark's point. Mark, this is a conversation and I'm willing to look at myself. I'll concede that maybe they didn't see children because of the programming. And I'll concede that maybe Mike and the other guy can't see what they did because of the programming. It doesn't mean you don't need to be accountable. You do. But they deserve grace. They deserve compassion, but you can't name a foundation after a person that spent 23 years by their own admission, by their own videos. That's what I'm saying. But again, it's not about the only reason I keep going back to the point, over to you, Janis, is I'm going to make whatever point I have to make sure that these dead children are not erased. That's all.
Right. So now let me ask you, Jamie. Jamie, let me ask you something. What makes you so different that you were lucky than all these other children who were in there with you? They were raised the same way, but you managed to pull yourself out and become successful.
I have a lot of scars. I have a lot of scars that people don't see, and a lot that people don't see. And I have a lot of parts of my life that aren't successful that people don't see. Right. So I'm not claiming, I'm not claiming to be this ultra success. Obviously, I have certain things in the world where I would be lying to say that I didn't have certain successes. Right. But that's not necessarily the way I see myself. The way I see myself is a person that was in this place with these kids, and most of them didn't make it. And I, for some reason, did. And no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to talk about what was done to them mentally when you had no mental intelligence, what these processes did to them. And no one wants to say what, but part of it, I do honestly believe this to answer. So I give a direct answer to the question, Janis. I mean, I feel like I was in this foxhole in World War I and I hear a dunk. And I look at my best friend, there's a hole through his helmet and he died. And then I hear my ex-best friend is on the right side. And I hear a dunk. And I look at it over there and he's on the ground and there's a hole through helmet and he died. And then my own helmet goes, dunk. And I fall back, get knocked backwards. And I take off my helmet and there's a hole straight through it. Child X shows you this. I had 5 near-death experiences. Okay. Yeah. And it goes, dunk. and I take off, and there's a hole clean through it, and I'm searching for the bullet hole, and it's not there. And I get to go home the next day. I carry that. Right. I'm not against anyone, but to answer your question directly is I think that I was given a genetic, that my parents were brilliant and that I had this thing in me that was dormant. You know, if you look at neuroplasticity, should someone ever be able to learn to write after 1920? Absolutely not. It's impossible based on like neuroscience. Like what I did is impossible, but say you could you graduate from an Ivy League school with going up against the smartest kids in the world that had a 15-year head start? Of course not. You can't do that. Could you then have books that win major literature, you know, like all these things like that I do? Could you write it at an elite level where I'm able to have books in bookstores and stuff like that? Absolutely not. So part of me, I think it has to be genetic, but it's not only genetic. It's genetics combined with work ethic and me using, I hate to say it, intention, but you know, that's what
I was going to say. Intention, your tension and work ethic. Yeah.
And positivity, you know, with that intention, you've got to be positive of what you're going to achieve.
Janis, let Janis answer the question. I'd like to know, why did you make it, you know what I mean, without that education and everything? And I know what you're going to say, so go ahead.
You do?
Yes. I think you're going to agree with what you just said, intention and knowing.
And positive. Yeah.
And you wanted to learn. You wanted to know, right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to learn, but I wanted to be street smart. I didn't want to have to study the books and learn that way. I want to be street smart. And also, like Mark, you know, when I was pissed off at Paul, I was tired of the criminals that he had hired into our mortgage company. And I was so done and fed up with that. And I was at the point of either divorce him or go and open my own mortgage company. And I went and I opened my own mortgage company. And every day I drove into work going, I can do this. I can do this was in my head that whole way from home to my new office. I was painting the walls.
Postulates.
Positive postulates.
And intention. And intention.
Without intention.
You know, I got to add to, you finish. But I got to add to it. Now that you said that, I got to add to it.
I got to the point I had all these loan officers coming over to me. I was making money to the point that I had to bail my husband's mortgage company out so he could make payroll.
Right.
But that was purely me being kind and having intention and being straight. It was like there was no funny business here. We just got the job done. And we did mortgages.
Jamie, I want to add to that.
Yeah.
I want to add to that too, Jamie. I got some of that too. And look, I know you don't like to equate this to being in Scientology and the Sea Org, but a lot of that had, because we worked under demand.
I do.
We constantly were under demand that you had to do it and you were expected to do it. And so that viewpoint carried over when we got out into the real world. It's like, okay, well, God, I don't have time to twiddle my thumbs. I got to go. I want to be successful. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do this and that. Right, Janis?
After listening,
and I had a child on the way, and then a baby, and I couldn't even. I had no money for the rent, so it's like I had to make money to survive.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I want to add to it now that I've listened to both you guys because I feel like I left something out. Listen, when I applied to get into the first year program, which led to me getting accepted eventually into the London School of Economics. And I was applying to a program at Georgetown University at the same time, a special program. And I had a girlfriend. All of this is explained. How I did this technically is explained in the Child X, the book. I walk everyone through how I did it because Child X is not an ex-Scientology book. It's not for ex-Scientologists. I want them to read it and I want them to see themselves in it and I want them to feel relief from it. But this book is for any human being that's been in the darkest hole of existence where there is no way out. You are doomed. You are effed. And you find a way out anyway. It's for everyone that can't get out and doesn't think there's a way back. But just to both of your points, I call it visualization. But the day I applied for Georgetown and I applied for London School of Economics in the same week, I almost had a nervous breakdown because I knew there was no way I was going to get accepted. And why am I applying all these things just to have failure thrown in my face? Right. So my ability to fail and fall on my face over and over and over again for years and still get up. I said this in the Jordan Arbinger interview that I did. If genius is if insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, then genius is doing, like Edison, is doing the same thing a different way over and over again and getting a different result. Right. So I do think I used visualization, what Scientologists call postulates, was a massive part of it. I'm kind of embarrassed to say that. But again, the main reason that I was, interested in talking to you guys, again, I love the fact that you guys call it an onion, is I really feel like with all the buzz out there, there's a lot of crimes that need to be talked about. I mean, Jeffrey Augustine does an amazing job with all the financial crimes. He's astonishing. He's forensic. And then Tony Ortega, has done an amazing job over the years breaking things that need to be broken. I mean, really, really amazing things. I can't say I agree with everything he does, but he's done amazing things.
Yeah.
Okay.
But listen, Jamie, can we all agree though? We don't agree with what everybody does all the time anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of like, you don't 100% of the time have to agree with people.
Yeah. But I think, I guess, the main point of this whole interview for me, we've talked about a few things, is that I truly believe in my heart that the greatest crime and most comprehensive, systematic, destructive crime that Scientology has committed is the systematic destruction of young children, not just in the Sea Org. These processes destroy public children as well. And it's not talked about as the main thing. Lots of stuff is talked about, and they're all conflated and they're equal. They're not all equal. The most important thing that we have to look at when we look at Scientology and what it's done to people, what it does to people, is the systematic physical and mental destruction of children and taking a pickaxe to the mind of a child. And it has been completely erased. No one knows that it was a system. No one knew that it was doctrinal. Like there was policies. I sent a bunch of them to, Mark Plummer had all these policies.
Yeah.
How it's intentional. And it's the least talked about.
Having grown up as a child with Scientology parents, anytime I would go to them to complain about my sister doing something to me or my brother doing something to me, it was always, what did you do to pull it in? And I hated it. Because
can you imagine telling
I never did anything.
Can you imagine telling a 5-year-old? Children think everything is their fault. If you tell a 5-year-old child that has bad things happening to them because they're growing up in a roach rat-infested slum in Los Angeles, and they're getting ill and all these things, that they're pulling it in because they're getting sick in these dormitories and they're pulling it in, what you're creating is a future alcoholic, drug addict, or person that's going to unalive themselves.
But I grew up with, what did I do to pull this in? I'd always self-list on it.
We got measles, we got chicken pox. I had
you did something to get that.
I almost died in a fire, which is in the book. I mean, all of these near-death experiences. I went to my grandmother, it's in the book, and I ended up being rushed to the emergency room where I was septic because no one was looking at my body at the cadet org or inside the dormitories. And every single time I was told that I caused it to happen to me.
Right.
This is what we never talk about.
Right.
This is what is not on Reddit. It's not on the Discord. And I'm embarrassed because the single worst thing that Scientology does to children is not meet their emotional or physical needs. And then when bad things happen to them, tell them that it's their fault. Children think everything's their fault anyway. And I just think, and I think if you tell a child that something that's out of their control is their fault, and you start telling them that when they're 3, they're going to become an alcoholic, they're going to become a drug addict, or they're going to unalive themselves is the likely outcome, especially if you don't educate them and we don't talk about it. Again, it's too much. But that is, if I were to say this, the single worst thing that is done to children in terms of the mental mind It's what you just said, Janis. So thank you for bringing it up, because I think it is the worst of everything. Taking the empathy out, the lack of love, not being allowed to express emotion, being conditioned to be controlled through the objectives. The objectives are grooming. Grooming is abuse, right? Objectives, people don't understand what the objectives are. We do a drill. It's the second thing you do after the purification thing, where it's the first thing you do in Hubbard's fever dream, is a series of processes where you just let someone practice controlling you for Miscavige wants you to do it for hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I don't even know why they have children doing the purification rundown if they've never had
no
drugs.
Yeah.
That's so stupid. It's unbelievable.
I had I had emergency surgery from neglect from the cadet org. I had to be rushed to the emergency room on a trip to New York when I was a kid. I almost lost my hearing. And nobody knew until I went to New York. My grandmother said, let's just take him to the local doctor. And I had to be rushed to Manhattan for surgery that night. And I almost lost my hearing. And in that surgery at 6, 7 years old, I had ether to put me under, where they took my tonsils out and I had my adenoids taken out. I almost lost my hearing. And I was told that I had to do the purification rundown because I had that surgery and I had ether.
Yeah, and the purification rundown, the sweat out program was basically for the heavy druggies who were doing LSD.
And for anybody that doesn't know what this is there's a program that you do where you take a bunch of vitamins and oil and niacin, and you sit in a sauna for 5 hours a day, supposedly to sweat out drugs. It's called the purification. It's the first thing you do before the grooming of the control that they call the objectives, which is really just you practicing being controlled for hundreds of hours.
I want to interject here because we could talk for hours, right? But I just wanted to make one last point to people out there watching and everything like that. Okay. In Scientology, they practice disconnection, and out in the real world, Janis and I do not practice disconnection. We are willing to talk to anyone on anything at any time. And Scientologists should be the same way, because you know what? If you truly believe what you believe, you're going to be able to stand your ground. And if you agree with somebody, great. But if you disagree, hey, it's good to listen to other viewpoints and that type of thing. So anyway, I just wanted to say, if anybody's offended by, our discussion today, hey, we're just having a friendly discussion here. Nobody's offended. Jamie, right? You're not offended. I'm not offended. Janis,
I mean, if I feel bad that I said something that I presume something.
No, not at all. But I'm just saying this is communication.
No, it is. And, and just to your point of you guys, I saw you guys do a show. I don't want to get into it. And, I didn't really understand your show. I like the name. And then I was watching this. I saw the Claudio Lulianato show and I loved it. But I saw this girl on a show and she was doing it. And all of a sudden it came out that she still had some beliefs that I knew you guys probably greatly disagreed with. And you guys just kept going like it was nothing. And so I knew, like, these guys, like, here this person is talking about something that these guys really, really disagree with. And they're sitting there and listening to it and being respectful. And I was just really impressed by that. And I've never and may never talk again. I'm not saying I will or I won't about what I said to this show about this foundation issue. Okay, which is an abomination and a Frankenstein. But I knew one of the reasons I said it here, and that may be the end of it for me. Maybe, may not, but is because I knew you guys might disagree with me. And I knew that even if you did disagree with me, we'd be able to disagree and be respectful of each other. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm not,
Jamie, there's a show that we did a couple of years ago about somebody who's actually a friend of ours who left Scientology, stole the OT materials, went to jail, and then started his advanced ability center in England. And then he produced the finest cannabis in all of the UK and went to jail for that. And we had him on our show.
Everyone,
but he was still a Scientologist.
That's correct, really,
and still believes he's a Scientologist. Absolutely. Wow. I'm not making fun of it. It's just that's who we talk to.
I've never seen that before. I've never seen that before. I've never seen a group, two ex members of this thing that would talk to somebody that still believes in it. I've never seen it.
Yeah,
I know
we
that
do
guy
it all the time.
No, I think it's great. And I know that guy Amir came out and he started,
Yeah.
he talked to a few people. I know you guys talked to him, and then he was quickly kicked out. Okay. Because he was
we held our show.
Yeah.
We held our show, and we didn't want to confront him with all the anti-Scientology stuff. We just wanted to find out from him, what's it like being on staff now? Because we've been out for 35, 36 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now he's a friend. He's a friend. He's come here and visited us. And stuff,
So I really appreciate you guys kind of, even whether you agree with me or not, letting me say my piece. I felt safe to do it. And I really just want to, the main thing for me is, please have a look at Child X. And when you do, understanding this is happening to thousands of kids. I read the audiobook. My body broke down from all the shame in the middle of the audiobook. Okay. I had the last year, despite the OSA stuff, completely just the shame of letting the world know what was done to my physical body. I went through the hardest emotional time of my life last year, knowing this was in the world. It wasn't this big victory march for me. So if you please get it, please read it, and know that it's happening to thousands of kids on 4 continents, and take an interest. Please start looking into the erasure of these children, because this story is not out, and these kids are getting older, and it's going to be erased. So I just urge you to please start talking about it, and please start being curious about the erasure of these children. I don't want our story to be erased. And I honestly feel, and this is the biggest thing that I feel, and I would love you guys to comment on it as we go out. Maybe it's the last thing you guys have the last word, is I believe in my heart that if people knew what this group had done to thousands of children, really knew, it would be over. Nobody would stand for it. I was telling a special forces colonel that I'm friends with before I came out, I wanted certain people, I was hiding it. I was living in shame. My publishers didn't know. My agents didn't know. I didn't want anyone to know I'd survived this Love Boat sci-fi massive child abuse where they did things to my body. Okay. And I was calling the special forces colonel because I didn't want him to hear from somebody else. And I started explaining it to him. And he says, "Are you talking about Scientology?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "That's the only group that exists within the United States where my wife and I sit back and we just constantly for years go, how is that allowed to exist?" And I really do believe that if people knew that this was systematically done to 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds, and what has happened to those children since, the public, the America, journalism, the general public would say, no, enough. They don't get erased, and maybe we would see some justice. That's what I want.
You can get Child X by Jamie Mustard. You can order it on Amazon. You can get it paperback. You can get the audiobook. I just downloaded the audiobook myself, and I'm looking forward to reading it. So you can get that there. And also, we'll put a link down in the video description.
It's only hardback.
Okay. But anyway, I'll put a link down below also in the video description where you can click to the Amazon site and order the book. By the same token, I have to mention, we've also got Janis's 2 books, Commodore's Messenger Book 1. That's Janis there at 13 years old with L. Ron Hubbard on the ship Apollo. She spent 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, through all of her teenage years into her early 20s with L. Ron Hubbard. Probably spent more time with him than just about anybody. But anyway, she tells the stories with photographs. This is book 1. And then this is Commodore's Messenger Book 2. And that, again, is Janis as a teenager with L. Ron Hubbard on a photo shoot. And she has amazing stories to tell about growing up in Scientology and being that close to L. Ron Hubbard. So you can also order those books down below in our merchandise store, or you can order them on Amazon.com, right, Janis?
Yes, that's right, Mark. Thank you.
And finally, I always like to say, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. Hit that like button, hit that notification button, as Janis likes to say, rock slam that like button, okay? And it helps get the word out, these stories out to people. Also, if you have any questions or comments about what we talked about today with Jamie, please go down in the comment section, ask any questions. We read them all. We'll forward them to Jamie, and we'll have him back. I'd love to have you back, Jamie, sometime.
I do want Jamie back because I want to ask him about his relationship with his mother, with his father,
I think we should do a show. I'll come back in the next week and we should have a conversation where I don't talk about anything controversial and we just explore.
Okay, let's do it.
Or it can be or it can be in a year, but I'm just saying. Yeah.
No, you said next week.
I'll do it. The question is, does Mark want to do it?
Absolutely. No, I'm fine with it. I love doing all these things. Okay. Anyway, until next time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.